This is a short introduction. It's only about 15 to 20 minutes. And what I am hoping to convince you is to answer the question of why should you do anything different when you film or you make a production for the mobile viewers, your viewing audience, than what you do for a cinema showing. So, firstly, what are the primary constraints that you've got when you compare watching a movie in a movie house, in a cinema, or watching on a mobile? There's three key differences. When you want to watch a film, the first constraint you've got is the size of the display. Then, you were alluding to it earlier on, it's in relation to your audience. In a movie house, there's a whole lot of people who, your audience sits down and they all watch this thing. They don't really talk to each other. So the social context is very different, where watching on a phone is very personalized. And the third key difference is connectivity. This is physical film, or these days with digital, a direct projection. You sit down on your movie, they turn that on and you watch it. You don't expect any delays. There's no connectivity between you, your viewers watching this, or in a mobile device where you have a wireless connection. Well, you have to pay every time for the connectivity. So the three key differences of your audiences and the constraints that you've got, you must understand your viewer who's using this, who's watching your film. They are constrained to a small screen. They are constrained in the sense that it is not private, well, it's private or personalized viewing amongst friends, it's more social. And because you have a connection to the source, you have to get that movie onto the device. So time is money. We'll use the standard megabytes for the data size. So how does this relate? The time that it takes to get to your phone, the cost to receive it on the phone, and the quality of the video that you get all amount to the size of the data. So if you want a small data file, it's going to get to the phone quicker, it's going to cost less, but the quality is your compromise. If you have a very large file, it's going to take a long time to get to the phone, it's going to cost you a lot, but the quality is going to be very good. I've picked a local South African operator, and I picked out one of the packages that it's 160 Rand for a gigabyte, which is about 16 cents per megabyte of data. So I want to compare everything based on the cost to that end user. So for mobile, there are multiple ways in which we can reduce the number of megabytes, the size of that file, of the video. And the first part is the technology side of things, which is encoding part of it. A lot of the work you guys do, it's hidden from you and you generally don't worry about it. But it is one element, one of the key elements of how data is already reduced. Because what you don't know is if you had to take the raw feed that you have, even 5 minutes of it, and try and send it to a phone, it's never going to get there and the person's going to be broke long before you ever transfer that file. So encoding goes on anyway, but I just wanted you to be aware of some of the effects of the encoding. So you've got this large video or TV show that you produce, you put it through an encoder and you're going to deliver it to a mobile device. So what does the encoder do? in order to reduce the size of it, the first thing it does is throws away the size, as we discussed earlier. What's the point of a video this big when this is all you're going to be viewing it on? There's no point in having a huge file when this is all you can see anyway. So encoders reduce the size. They also reduce the color. What it turns out is our eyes are not as sensitive to color as we are to black and white, the brightness of things. We are much more sensitive to that. So it turns out you can throw away 3/4 of the color information and humans won't notice the difference. Then we come to the parts that you can start seeing now. So as you wanting to make this thing encoded further and further, you can remove the sharpness. So around sharp edges, you can soften it a little bit. And this will also reduce the size of the video. You can throw away frame. A video sequence consists of lots of pictures all coming at you. In fact, in our standards, 25 frames a second. And that makes it look like nice, smooth motion. If you start throwing away some of these frames, then you start getting that jerky effect. And you can make it worse and worse and worse, and that's how you can reduce the data size further and further. And then finally, picture quality. Well, you can actually, and if some of you have seen this in any low bitrate stuff, it starts to look very blocky. You can start seeing blocks appear, and that's the other form of reduction of every picture when you're really starting to try and make it as small as possible. So you can reduce the data size through encoding, but the other method of reducing it is the way that you film and the way that you produce your videos will determine the size of the video that's going to be transferred. So here is where your art meets the technology. I am in no way promoting that you don't do these kind of things. I'm just asking you that if you are aware of them, and if you're going to be filming specifically for mobile, if you follow or you have an understanding of what the impact is of the way that you film and the way that you produce and the way that you put your productions together, can actually have a major impact in the cost and the time it takes to deliver those files to people throughout the world. So let's start with the scene effects. Now, you've got a set of scenes here, and what I've put forward here is you might have a complex background, so you can see the umbrellas. It's a fairly complex background compared to a very plain background. There's a lot of close-in motion, high motion filling your whole viewpoint, or the high motion not filling it so much, or very low motion filling a small amount. So the way you place your scenes, I want to show you what difference this would make. So this video, you can see the high-end motion, switching between cameras, very close in, a lot of action going on with a complex background. If we were to play that kind of production for 1 hour, it would cost your viewer about 68 Rand to get that to their phone and watch it. If we make a slight change now and we back away a bit so that the amount of high action is closer to the middle and the background is a bit more static but still complex, 37 Rand. So the simple difference of how you set up your scenes can make a very large difference to what your end viewer is going to have to pay and how long they're going to take to receive that file. Now, if we go the other extreme, where there's very low motion, because then we might ask the question, well, how low can you actually go? What would be the cheapest and simplest to deliver a message? very little motion. It doesn't have to be a black background, but a simple, low complexity background. Very little movement going on. These are very big jumps. Now I'm going to repeat again. It's not that you must film everything like this. You have an art. You guys want to portray an emotion to your recipients. You want to express something. I am in no way saying you don't do that when you're filming for mobile. I'm just saying be aware of how much of these you might put in your video. How you might arrange your scenes actually will make a very large difference to your gogo sitting in Ulundi. You're not going to be that happy with you if you give her a film that cost her 68 Rand when you could have given her one that only cost 2 Rand. Let's look at the difference between when you crossfade between videos or switching between cameras, or if you do sharp switching, you flick between them. We'll have a look, how much would that cost if you had to have a lot of that in 1 hour? 26 Rand. So reasonably complex on the one side, very low complexity on the other, some kind of mix. So you can see it almost halves the price, whether you switch or you fade. Again, not that you mustn't crossfade, but it must mean something when you're filming for mobile. That effect that you're trying to give your audience, just give it a thought to the cost of what you're giving to somebody on the other end. So zooming. Of course, fast zooming is going to be more than slow zooming, but the question might be by how much? Less than half. So these are extremes. You can see it was very slow zooming and very fast zooming in and out. But that's the kind of range that you can expect when you're using zooming in your productions. Panning, we have a very, it is the same question of the difference of whether you're doing fast panning or slow. What you might notice is even the fast panning is better than fast zooming. The fast zooming was 23 Rand. This is only 15 Rand. So panning is better than zooming. All right, so the last one I want to show you is this handheld effect. So this handheld shaking effect that is quite commonly used, the impact of that is somewhat more than the others, but it's kind of obvious, I guess, because it's like lots of panning and zooming and having the same effect. So I've picked a handful of these effects to try and hopefully that I have now convinced you that your concern needs to be for your audiences who are on the other end watching what you produce for their mobile devices. So your primary target for this over some connection is you want to make your film get to them as quickly as possible and for it to cost as little as possible. There is a combination of technology, being the encoding side of things, and that the way you film, that can all impact those two factors. What we've been through here from your perspective is in filming, there are scene effects, which is the action, how fast that central action is, how much it fills the view space, and how complex is the background during that process. There are production effects between fading and switching, showing that switching can give you lower rates than fading, and your camera effects, shaking being the most expensive one, zooming, and then panning. So I hope that I have convinced you that if you're going to film for mobile, which you guys are definitely going to be doing in your production lifespan, mobile, as I said before, is going to become probably the most common form of viewing of all video production globally, if it isn't already, given YouTube, etc., is going to be very soon the case. We in emerging economies, unfortunately, have very large data costs, so it matters. And in a lot of rural areas from South America, Southeast Asia, and Africa, we have very low infrastructure environments, which means that our connectivity is low, and so we have to produce to be able to deliver into these spaces. Thank you. Thanks for the story. Listening to the story.